I grabbed Daniel's sleeve as he tried to slip past the bar door with a small wrapped box in his other hand. Suspicion hit me the moment I felt the bundle, a sharp tightening in my throat that made my voice come out too loud.
No, it's
"Daniel,"
not. I've
I
ruined
said,
everything.
and he froze with the box angled away from my sight. His hand moved to pull free, his jaw tightened. The bar's music thinned around us.
Open it,
Conversation paused at 2 tables. Within 3 sentences, the problem sat on the threshold. He was leaving,
I understand.
and he carried something he had not told me about. I had come that night because Lena insisted I get out of my apartment and stop staring at the chain on my door. I wore the worn leather jacket I always wear when I want to feel steady, the silver locket tucked under my shirt where I could finger it without anyone seeing. My coat sleeves smelled faintly of jasmine from the coffee shop earlier. The locket rested cold against my palm when I pulled my hand back. I stepped in front of him and held his sleeve until his shoulder bent. "Don't do this like it's nothing," I said. The bar's neon sign made a slim line of light across his cheek. He tried a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Claire, please." "Please what, Daniel?" "Leave with a box." I let my voice break on the name. Suspicion pushed my shoulders forward. I could feel it in the way my fingers tightened. I saw the silver watch on his wrist catch the light as he folded his hand. "What is in the box?" I asked. He looked past me toward the street. "It's just something I need to take care of. Daniel." His words came measured, precise, like someone planning his next step. He avoided my gaze. "Claire, you shouldn't be here." He began to turn. Lena rose from the bar stool beside us and brushed hair from her face. "Daniel Archer, drop it," she said, voice low but hard. She reached, and the corner of the box brushed the floor. The box slid, and something clinked. When it hit Lena's shoe, it opened a seam, and a soft clatter sent a small metal shape across the tiles. Lena stooped and picked up the silver locket. I saw it first. Our locket, the one Daniel had given me 2 summers ago. My fingers went cold even through the jacket. Lena held it by its chain, and the locket hung open on a thin hinge, revealing an inner compartment I had never noticed when Daniel pressed it into my hand months before. Her mouth flattened. "Claire," Lena louder now, as if to pull the moment into focus. The bartender looked up at the commotion, then back down, pretending his interest was work. I heard the scrape of stools. Daniel's face went blank. He stepped back toward the doorway. Rain had started outside, and the street lamp threw a pale circle of light through the puddles. "You shouldn't have been following me," he said without meeting Lena's eyes. "I wasn't following you," I said. My voice shortened. I moved to block the doorway. "Why do you have my locket?" The question struck like a thrown thing. Conversation around us resumed in nervous fragments. Suspicion is a small, practical thing when it arrives. A glance, a wrong angle, a detail that refuses easy explanation. It was practical now, not a feeling to be catalogued later. Daniel tried to explain with hands that folded and unfolded. "It's not what you think, Claire." "I can explain." He kept his back to the door. He sounded like a man who had practiced calm in front of a mirror. I could see his fingers press against the seam of the box he still held. Lena opened the locket wider and pointed with the chain. "There is something inside, Claire." A little paper. A date. She turned it so the light hit the tiny folded page. The bartender cleared his throat and moved back to the bottles. I moved closer and took the locket from her fingers. We stepped out under the street lamp, the rain making the asphalt shine. The lamplight cut the night into a small, bright stage. Daniel stood with the wrapped box pinched in one hand and the other in his pocket. He had a dark smudge on his sleeve, near the cuff, a smear that looked like grease or ink. He rubbed at it with a thumb before he noticed my stare. "What is that on your sleeve?" I asked. My voice held an edge that came from something harder than suspicion now. Anger arrived as a physical pressure. I felt my jaw tighten and my palms go sweaty. "Why won't you look at me?" I added. Daniel's eyes flicked up and away. "It came from the kitchen," he said. "I was helping out." He stopped. He folded his hands as if to hold himself still. "Claire, listen. Give me a minute, please." He tried to step past. I reached down and found the locket's inner paper, folded small and damp at the hinge. I unfolded it with one finger. Lena's voice was close to a whisper even with the rain. "There's a name, Claire. It's not yours." She sounded as if she were trying to keep a lid on a pot about to boil. Her fingers brushed mine. I felt the paper between us and read the name aloud before I fully registered what I was saying. Evelyn March, October 7th. Daniel flinched like a man struck. "It's not what you think," he said, and his voice became clipped. His shoulders curled inward. He looked suddenly smaller under the lamp. My anger sharpened into a new direction. "Who's Evelyn March?" "Daniel," I asked, and the name felt like a test. He stared at the wet pavement and then at his hands. "Claire." I didn't. He stopped himself. In the pause I heard the distant clatter of an empty bus. I stepped closer. "Daniel, what is that Polaroid? Why is there a name and a date?" I kept my voice low so the bar wouldn't hear the way it trembled. Lena's hand found mine. She squeezed. "Claire, there's something else in there." Her fingers drew the folded paper wider. A small corner of photographic paper unfolded, a square with the white margin and the grainy, overexposed center. She held it up. Rain caught on the edge and almost erased the image into gloss. I recognized my own apartment's curtains in the blurred background. The picture was of my own couch, my lamp, the throw rug I kept by the coffee table. And there I was. A photograph of me asleep on my sofa, hair loose, the silver locket visible at my collar. I felt a cold that was not the night air. It was a cold that unlatched a different set of questions. Someone had been inside my home while I slept. The paper slipped from Lena's fingers. It landed on wet asphalt, and the image soaked a hairline of gray. Daniel's shoulders rose and fell with a quick, shallow breath. For the first time his face showed rawness. "Claire," he said, voice low. "I can explain. I know how it looks." He took a step forward and then stopped. He avoided my eyes like a man avoiding a trap. "Explain what, Daniel?" "Explain a photo of me in my apartment while I slept." My voice lost the evenness Lena had taught me to keep. My hands spread palms up, because I couldn't make the words smaller. The street lamp made his stubble dark against his jaw. "Daniel, whose date is that?" He swallowed. "Evelyn, it's a name from a job." "Claire, please." He folded his hands tightly, fingers white at the knuckles. Lena stepped between him and the doorway without thinking. "Daniel Archer, you stand where you are, and you tell Claire the truth now." "Lena." Her voice held no softness. The bar's door clicked as someone left. A taxi passed on the far side of the road. There were 3 lines of rapid exchange then, each shot with short breaths and quick words. "Daniel, did you go into my apartment?" I asked. "No." "Daniel, did you give anyone a key?" I asked. "No." He hit fast and the word came thin. "Then who took that photo?" Lena demanded. His eyes moved. He swallowed and then pointed at the wrapped box. "That box is my father's. He sent it to me tonight." I was taking it for him. His voice tried for steadiness and landed on the edge of something else. Evelyn March is a client my firm handled." He spoke the word firm with a professional flatness that didn't fit the rawness in his hands. The suspicion in me narrowed into a precise blade. I studied the box and the way his thumb rubbed at the dark smear on his sleeve. The smear looked like the same dark tone in the Polaroid's shadow near the television stand. I moved to the car, bent, and picked up a sliver of gray tape clinging to the box seam. It stuck to my glove. My breath felt loud. Lena pushed a hand to her mouth. "Claire, maybe." She began, then stopped because she didn't want to nudge me toward a decision she couldn't fix. Her eyes tracked Daniel like a hound watching a fox. His name, and that alone made him look at her. "Daniel," she said, slow and blunt. He looked like a man at a ledge. The rain got harder. He stammered a version of the story. Evelyn March had hired his former company for a private audit. He'd met her once, late last year, at a conference. The locket must have slipped somehow, must have been passed along by mistake. Every line sounded rehearsed. Every line created space for more doubt. Then he did something I did not expect. He took one step away, then another, and he ran. He bolted through the rain, the wrapped box tucked under his arm like contraband. Lena shouted, and I called his name until my voice hurt. He disappeared into the night with his shoulders hunched, and the watch on his wrist, catching the lamplight in short flashes. Lena lunged after him only a stride. She stopped when I held her back with my hand on her elbow. "Lena, call someone," I said. "Call the police. Call someone who can get a look at that Polaroid." My voice was clipped. I felt fear then, real and physical. My palms damp, my legs a little weak. I could hear the city around us making its usual noises as if nothing had happened. She fumbled her phone with hands that shook and called a number while talking fast. 911. "Yes, there's been an incident. My friend has a photograph that suggests someone entered her apartment." Her words broke into sentences of breath. Lena kept repeating my address, and I listened to the operator confirm and ask questions. Conversation around us resumed with smaller urgency, people pulling their jackets close. When they left, the bar's door closed behind the last stranger, and the rain thinned to a mist. I stood on the sidewalk with the wet Polaroid between my fingers. Lena's arm was at my shoulder even though she wasn't touching me. "Claire," she said, "quiet. We will go to your place. We'll check the locks. We'll not let this sit." She sounded like a person issuing a plan. At home, the door latch felt different under my palm. I noticed a scuff on the paint, a thin smear on the doorknob that matched the dark mark on Daniel's sleeve. I called the landlord from the doorway and left a message about the lock, then walked inside with a flashlight. The living room light threw a rectangle on the rug. The sofa looked exactly as I'd left it. The coffee cup on the table had dried ring marks. The silver locket lay in the palm of my hand, now cold and heavy with rain. I checked the bedroom window latch, then the back of the apartment, noting the thrown away cigarette butt I hadn't seen before on the fire escape. The smell of coffee lingered in the kitchen. I opened a closet to check for anything else out of place. Everything seemed ordinary except the photograph and the locket. I sat on the edge of my couch and pressed the Polaroid flat on the table. My hands trembled when I moved the lamp to get a better look. Fear settled into a working mode. It pushed me to do things I could measure. Call a locksmith, change the locks, text Lena and ask her to come back. I wrote down the name in the photograph and the date on a scrap of paper. I pushed my thumbs into my eye sockets for a moment because my vision blurred with the urge to cry. I did not cry. I counted the steps from the door to the window instead. Lena arrived with an overnight bag and a spare set of keys she'd used once before in emergencies. She brought a thermos of coffee and a small flashlight. She sat at my kitchen table and said, "We leave that locket on the bench outside the building. We make a record." She reached out and placed a hand over mine. "We don't hand it back to him, Claire." "Not tonight." I looked at the silver hinge, the folded Polaroid, the date on the corner. I set the locket into my palm and felt the wear on its surface, the place where the metal had been rubbed smooth by years of contact. The decision arrived with the same clarity as a physical object. I could run after him and shout accusations into rain. I could tear apart his apartment with my own hands, or I could take a step that reclaimed my agency. I stood up and grabbed my coat. We walked to the small park bench under the block's single oak. The morning mist had not fully cleared. The city smelled like wet concrete and something faintly floral from a passing delivery. Lena watched me when I lifted the locket and set it on the bench as if I were placing a small evidence bag into a collection box. She did not touch it. Her breath made a small cloud. I said, "I'm letting him go tonight. I'm not letting him turn this into my chase." My voice was steady. I felt a shift from suspicion to a hard, practical resolve. Lena nodded and squeezed my arm. "Claire, we'll get whatever proof we can. We'll not leave it alone." She sounded both protective and pragmatic. I closed my hand on nothing and then left the locket where it lay. We left the bench with the plan to call the landlord and a locksmith in the morning. We agreed to meet at my apartment within an hour. I walked away and did not look back until I reached the corner. The locket rested on the bench, small and bright in the dim light, a marker of a choice. I felt the decision in the soles of my shoes, steady and deliberate. When I unlocked the door to go back up the stairs, I noticed the faint smear on the knob again and took a photograph of it with my phone. I labeled the image with the time and the word doorknob. I typed a message to Lena. "Photo done. Meet me back at 8. Bring change of locks." I hit send. The message left a tiny blue check. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, the latch catching with a single, ordinary click. I left the chapter's conflict settled for the night in a single action. I would not follow Daniel into the dark. I would not demand immediate answers on the street. I would gather facts and protect the small territory that was mine. The photograph and the smear were now pieces of evidence, not notes in a spiral. Lena stayed on the couch and watched me make a pot of coffee, her fingers fidgeting with the knit scarf she always brings. We did not speak much. The conversation we needed would be efficient, deliberate, and legal. Before I slept, I took one last look at the Polaroid laid out on the table. I smoothed the corner with a thumb. The image no longer looked like an accusation alone. It looked like proof that I had been violated, that recognition made the night's choice feel necessary and exact. I turned off the lamp and let the apartment fall into measured dark. In the quiet, I heard Lena's slow breathing and the building's pipes. I set my phone face up on the table so it would not hide any incoming call. The click of my front door's deadbolt sounded precise as a recorded decision, and I sat on the couch until sleep pressed down the edges of my anxiety. When I woke an hour before dawn to the sound of a trash truck, I found Lena already up, boots on. The locket gone from the bench, but the Polaroid still on my table. She had wrapped the locket in a paper towel and placed it in an envelope labeled with my initials. "I took it," she said, blunt and steady. "For safekeeping and for the police." Her voice held the same practical tone we'd used all night. I nodded and reached for the envelope, feeling the weight of one night's decisions in the seal. We had moved through the sequence the way people do when they mean to act. Gather, secure, notify. The decision to let Daniel go that night was not surrender. It was a deliberate move toward control, toward a record that would hold if he came back with explanations. I left my door locked and my phone close. Lena sat across from me and made a plan out loud. Locksmith, photographs uploaded, police report the moment the station opened. She repeated the address and the time for each call as if anchoring a set of coordinates. Outside, on a bench that now held an empty space where a silver locket had been, the city kept moving. A bus sighed at the light. A dog barked twice down the block. The locket was sealed in an envelope that would become a chain of custody. That concrete action closed the chapter's urgent question. I would not chase him into unknowns tonight. I would hold evidence and let institutions do their job. The decision landed in my hands like a small tool I could use. I poured coffee and watched Lena make notes until sunlight cut a thin square across the table. And then I stood and prepared to do the practical things that would turn suspicion into proof. I forced the apartment door open and my hand grazed the edge of an envelope beneath the lamp before I could think a full sentence. Suspicion hit me so sharply I tasted metal. That suspicion made me move without waiting for permission. I cradled the envelope with one hand and kept the other on the door, listening for any sound that might betray him. The hallway light was a thin strip. The living room was darker, and the envelope looked deliberate, placed, not dropped. I had arrived because of the wrapped box from the bar. I told myself I would ask questions, not make accusations. I remembered the box in Daniel's hand when I grabbed his sleeve at the bar, the way he angled it away from my view. That memory sat like a bruise under my ribs and turned into suspicion the second I found the envelope. My phone vibrated with Lena's name. I thumbed it off and slid the flap open. The first sheet was a printed list of times and addresses. The second was a photograph on glossy paper. I held it against the lamp, and my breath snagged when the photo showed Daniel coming out of a building I did not know, his silver watch catching the streetlight. There was a second photo taped behind it, taken from a distance through a hedge. My name was nowhere on those pages. A storage unit key lay folded into the envelope like a quiet accusation. I heard the stairwell door click, footsteps on the landing. My suspicion shifted into anger so fast my hands shook. I slid back into the hallway and braced myself at the doorway when Daniel's key scraped the lock. I did not step forward to meet him. I held up the photograph the way a witness might hold evidence. "Daniel," I said. The word came out level, but my voice felt thin. He looked at the photo, then at the key, then at me. "Claire, His voice was low. He kept his hand on the doorknob as if he might still leave. I didn't expect you here. I expected honesty, Daniel. I expected an explanation for this. I kept my eyes on the photos like they could force him to speak. My fingers tightened on the edges. He closed the door slow, the lock clicking behind him. You shouldn't have come here, Claire, he said. You shouldn't have a storage key tucked under your lamp either. I stepped into the small entry, my shoes scuffing the worn runner. The apartment smelled like cedar and the faint cologne I had once liked enough to kiss. That smell now felt like a wrapper over something I could not yet name. Daniel went still. He removed his jacket and set it on the coat chair. Claire, let me what, Daniel? Let me walk into whatever this is while you keep your secrets, I said. He sucked a breath and looked away. There's an explanation. I can explain. I held up the storage key and the photos. Explain this. Daniel's jaw worked. Those aren't what you think. He tried to step forward and then stopped as if the air itself told him not to. Claire, please. Sit down. I did not move. Say it here. Don't ask me to sit down in your living room while you reorder the truth. My voice had a hard edge I did not like. A siren wailed faintly in the distance. We stood there like two people who had once shared a map and now found themselves holding different maps entirely. I pressed my thumb against the photograph. The edge cut my skin. The sting brought a clear, new emotion. Fear. Not of him, exactly, but of whatever the photos suggested, that someone had been watching, that our lives might have been threaded into someone else's plan. That fear made my legs feel thin. Before either of us could say another measured sentence, my phone lit up with Lena's name again. I had called her as I left the bar, not fully certain I wanted backup, but certain I did not want to be alone with my questions. I answered and kept the call on speaker. Claire. Lena's voice came through, bright and immediate. Are you at his place? I'm here. I let the envelope show. There are photos. There's a key. Don't let him close you in. Claire. Lena's voice changed. It lost the bright edge and gained a clipped focus she used when she wanted to sort facts. Quickly. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Lock the door if you can. Daniel moved before I could object. You don't have to involve her, Claire. Don't drag Lena into this. Daniel, do not tell me what to do right now. I turned to him. My hands were steady despite the tremor in my chest. Lena will decide how she wants to be involved. He stared at my face like he was trying to read a sign written in a new language. Claire. Daniel, who is the woman in the photos? I asked. The question landed plainly. My suspicion forced him to answer. Daniel's eyes flicked to the photos and then to the closed hallway. He swallowed. It's not like that. It's complicated. Complicated is a word for finances, not for people hiding from cameras. I said, who is she? Daniel. He exhaled sharp. Her name is Mara. She used to work with a client of mine. I thought it was over months ago. It's not what you think, Claire. I promise. I cut him off because talking felt like water over a roof of ice. You promised a lot before, Daniel. You promised when you gave me that silver watch for my birthday, and when you told me you were leaving early for a meeting. You promised one time at the bar when I grabbed your sleeve and you angled a box away. You promised. He flinched at the list. Claire, At that moment there came a precise, heavy knock on the door. Not the soft repeated jangle of a neighbor, but one hard series of 3 knocks that made the apartment fell still. Lena's voice on my phone stopped mid-sentence. I felt my breath shorten. The fear that had been a cold thought tightened into a physical pressure at my throat. Daniel's hand went to his jacket pocket like a reflex. His pupils narrowed. Who is it? I asked, though my question sounded small compared to the knock. Daniel moved to the peephole and froze, then stepped back. He looked at me without answering. The silence swelled until Lena's voice cut through again, now in the hallway outside the building, louder and a few footsteps away. Claire! Lena called. I'm in the stairwell. Open up! Relief was a stupid, sharp thing. I yanked the door open a crack and Lena slipped in carrying her bag and a look that shut down any argument she had not yet made. She saw the photos on my palm, then Daniel, Lena. She left her scarf on the coat chair and put her bag on the floor. You look guilty. Her tone was not poetic. It was pointed and practical. He straightened Lena high. This isn't what it looks like. Lena's eyes flicked to the photograph. Claire, give it to me. She took the photo without waiting. She did not need permission. She moved like someone who had been called to handle emergencies before. Who is Mara? Lena. Daniel's mouth opened. She was a client contact. I handled a transfer. She for help. It was professional. Stop. Lena's hand cut the air. Daniel, look at me. Did you tell Claire anything at all about this? He did not answer at once. His hands folded. No, Daniel Archer, Lena, using his full name in a way that made him look smaller. You left a key in your own living room, and you didn't tell Claire. Why didn't you tell her? He ran a hand over his face. Because I thought I could protect her. I thought keeping it separate would keep her safe. Lena laughed once, a short sound with no humor. Protect her by keeping her in the dark. Daniel, that reads like cowardice more than protection. I felt anger turn into a sharper, colder clarity. The emotion shifted again. Suspicion to anger to clarity. I stepped forward and put the photos on his coffee table. Daniel, were you meeting her in that storage unit? I asked. He looked at the key. No, not exactly. It's complicated in a way I can explain, Claire. I take responsibility for hiding this, but it's not an affair, not an affair. Lena, then what is it? Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at me. There's more. I didn't want to tell you because I thought saying it aloud would make it true. I thought I could handle it without hurting you. Daniel, tell me now. My voice held the edge of command I used when Lena's scarf had once caught fire on a candle and nobody could wait while explanations formed. If not for me, then for whatever or whoever put these pictures in your lamp, he swallowed. Those photos were taken by someone I can't place. I found an envelope like this in my car 2 weeks ago. I thought it was an odd delivery, an odd threat. I went to the storage unit to check whether something had been left there, and I found things, documents, that didn't belong to me. I thought I could sort them with distance. I didn't want to drag you in. Lena's eyes were quick and blunt. Who else knows about the storage unit? Who has keys? Daniel's jaw clenched. I don't know, that's the thing. I thought I had it managed. You thought managing secrets was managing danger. Lena, Daniel, that's not how this works. I watched him as he spoke, searching for the man I had known. The man who once left a folded note on my pillow before a business trip. He looked smaller, tired in his face, and there were thin lines by his eyes I had not noticed before. But the photos still meant someone had been tracking him, or tracking the places he went. That fact was not softened by his tiredness. Lena pushed a hand through her curls and paced once into the living room. Okay. We have photos, a storage key, and a name, Mara. We also have an envelope in the lamp that suggests someone delivered evidence or a warning. Either way, it's surveillance. Claire, do you want me to call the police? The question landed like a tool on a table. Calling the police would make everything public. Not calling them left the three of us with a threat we could not name. I remembered the bar, the wrapped box in Daniel's hand, my fingers on his sleeve. How many other small gestures had I misread or ignored? I felt the world tilt around the edges, but I kept my voice steady. Not yet, I said. If this is surveillance, we need to know what it points to first. We need the storage unit. We can't just go walk into a storage unit without knowing who put those photos there. Daniel, we can if we take precautions. Lena. Claire. You said there's a key. Let's go look. Together, another shift. Clarity moved to resolve. The fear remained, but it was a tool now, fuel for action. We left the apartment in a tight line, Lena carrying a small flashlight from her bag. The street was damp from an earlier rain. Sodium lamps made slick reflections on the pavement. We moved quickly down the stairwell and out into the night with the storage key folded in my coat pocket like a thin, dangerous talisman. The self-storage facility smelled of oil and metal when we found it. A bank of garage doors lined the corridor. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a steady rhythm. I slid the key into the lock of the unit number on the list and turned it. The bolt resisted, then gave with a small clank. Inside the unit, we found a chest of plastic crates, a collapsed folding chair, and a cardboard box with the client's name printed on the side. On top of the box lay a small mirror with lipstick smudges and a receipt for a taxi to a stretch of road I did not recognize. A folded map fell out of one crate as I nudged it. "Claire, look at this." "Lena." She held up a crumpled receipt with a time that matched one of the photos. "This is the same night in the photo. It's the same hour." I bent and picked up a small leather pouch from the floor. Inside was a silver token the size of a coin stamped with an emblem I did not know. My fingers closed around it and a thin spike of dread moved up my arm. I turned the token over. The metal was warm with the heat of the storage unit's fluorescent lights. The sound of a van door slamming outside made all three of us freeze. We heard boots on concrete. Daniel's face went as white as the fluorescent tubes. "Someone's here, Daniel," almost in a whisper. From the corridor came a voice, low, deliberate. "Is someone in Unit 15? Lena's hand tightened on the small flashlight until her knuckles showed. "Who are you?" she called back. Silence answered. The voice did not return. We moved out of the unit and locked it behind us as if a lock could stop the way our situations had shifted. On the sidewalk, the van headlights made a rectangle of light. A figure stood by the vehicle, hands tucked into the pockets of a hooded jacket. He did not step forward. He watched. I felt my pulse beat against my throat. The fear returned sharper. This was not a quiet betrayal. This was someone announcing their presence. The emotion shifted again. Clarity to fear to protective resolve. "Call the police now." "Lena," her voice rapid. She was already on her phone. The figure moved his head, not in a threatening way exactly, but like a person marking time. The van idled and then rolled away slowly, its taillights vanishing down the block. When the police arrived, they took statements with the efficiency of people who had practiced shock. They photographed the storage unit and the token. They Daniel for his employment records, his client list, and his recent movements. At one point, an officer asked me if I wanted to press charges for trespass. "Not yet," I told him. My voice surprised me with its calm. I thought pressing charges would make things real in a way I did not want. I thought keeping the situation contained might allow us to learn who Mara was, and whether Mara was a threat. Lena stayed close, asking the officers the right questions and making sure my statements were recorded without dramatic flourish. She moved between me and Daniel when Daniel tried to say something private. She translated his hesitations into direct questions. "Daniel, who has access to your email and your accounts?" she asked. "I changed passwords last month." "I don't." Daniel began. "Did you give anyone copies?" Lena pressed. "No. I didn't give anyone copies." He looked like he wanted to be believed. He looked like he wanted to be believed so much it almost read as an ache. Back in the apartment, after the officers left with a promise to check the van's registration and the storage facility's logs, we sat around his coffee table. The apartment felt altered, the way a room might feel after someone rearranged the furniture while you slept. "Show me again where you found the envelope." "Claire." "Lena." I walked to the lamp and described the fold and the way the key had been tucked beneath it. I said the words aloud, because speaking them made them real, and because saying details out loud sometimes revealed holes in the story that sound could catch. Daniel sat on the couch and watched me. "I should have told you when I found the first envelope in my car. I should have told you when I noticed the photographs. I tried to handle it. I thought I could keep anything dangerous away from you." Lena looked at him like she was calculating whether he was being honest. "Daniel, telling Claire isn't the same as letting danger into her life. If someone is watching, Claire needs to choose with information, not with your decisions alone." He nodded. "You rewrite." I didn't think. "I'm sorry, I felt tired in a way I had not expected. I had wanted answers. I had wanted his name for the woman and for explanations. I had wanted to sort truth from lie. Now I wanted something smaller and more immediate, to know whether I was safe tonight. That need felt neither noble nor melodramatic. It was practical. We checked the lock on the front door 3 times before Lena left. She kissed my forehead with a quick, short gesture and said, "Claire, keep your phone on. Call me if he comes back." I'm 2 blocks away, Lena, I said. Thank you, she waved it off. Don't be dramatic, but do call. I'm not letting you face this alone. After Lena left, Daniel stood by the window and watched the street from the shallow arc of light cast by the corner lamp. I walked to the mantel where the silver locket rested and kept my hand on its chain. The token I had found in the storage unit seemed to press against the metal of the locket through the cloth I tucked it into. I felt the cool of the silver against my palm. Claire, Daniel quietly, I know I broke trust. I know hiding made it worse. I can leave if you want. If leaving will mean you re not followed, I'll go. The offer came out of a place that wanted to protect me, and also a place that wanted absolution. My chest tightened. I could take him back into my arms and try to rebuild, or I could push him into the dark where he said he belonged and force the distance ourselves. I thought of the van, of the man watching us at the storage unit, of the photos hidden under a lamp. I thought of the bar and the wrapped box angled away from my sight, and how many small choices had led me here. I thought of Lena's steady presence and of the small silver token warm in my hand. My decision did not arrive as a burst of courage. It arrived as a series of small, deliberate movements. I stepped away from the window and moved to the kitchen doorway that spilled into the stairwell. I set the locket down on the counter and put the token beside it. Daniel, I said, naming him the way Lena had when she needed him to answer plainly. If you leave now, you'll be out in the street, and I'll call the police if you come back tonight. I will not be your shelter if being sheltered means I'm being watched. He looked at me with a pleading that was not theatrical. Claire, please. I can keep you safe. Let me stay. You kept your secrets, Daniel, that's on you. I'm choosing not to be used as cover for whatever you were trying to fix alone. I paused. My hands were steady go. Now he folded his hands as he had always done when he was nervous. The motion looked familiar, haunted. He went to the door without taking his jacket, his silver watch flashing once in the light. He opened the door a crack and lingered. Claire, I'm sorry. The words plainly. Daniel, go, I said. He stepped into the stairwell. I watched him descend, his shoulders set in a way that said he was carrying something heavy but not a burden he would acknowledge. Lena stood in the doorway as he reached the bottom of the stairs. She watched him go until the door closed softly and the building's dull hum filled the silence afterward. When the door shut, a small, almost invisible thing happened. A folded piece of paper slid from the pocket of Daniel's jacket and fluttered to the floor near the coat chair. I picked it up. It was a receipt for a diner 3 blocks away with a time that matched one of the surveillance photos and a scrawled note. For later, my fingers tightened around it. I moved to the mantel and opened my locket. Inside, tucked against the old photograph of my mother, was the silver token the storage unit had held. It had been placed into my locket without my knowledge. The token fit there like a secret. I felt anger flare and then a thin, fierce clarity rise in its place. I folded the receipt and left it on the table. I picked up the phone and dialed Lena. When she picked up, I did not say thank you or make a promise about tomorrow. I said, Lena, stay close tonight. There's more to find, she answered. I will be at your place. Don't go anywhere. I slid the locket closed and set it on the table beside the photos. The room held its ordinary objects, mug lamp, coat chair, but each one had taken on the weight of what had happened. Discovery, confrontation, the hard knock, the surveillance, the decision to let him go. The chapter ended not with a speech or a vow, but with the small, decisive act of locking the locket and placing the token where I could see it. That action made the choice real. Outside, the streetlight buzzed. Inside, I folded the envelope and slid it into a drawer. I leaned my back against the kitchen doorframe and counted the seconds until Lena arrived, because counting seconds is a way of staying practical when feelings crowd the edges. The final sound of the chapter was the low click of the front door as I locked it once more, hearing the bolt find its metal with a single, clear click. I grabbed Daniel's sleeve beneath the street lamp as his hand closed on a small wrapped box. Suspicion tightened my throat the way cold air bites the back of your mouth. It had been the steady reason I'd followed him out from the bar. He tried to pull free. He did not want to speak beneath the rain, but the box made everything urgent and visible. The central problem pressed at me within seconds. He was leaving, and whatever was in that package might be either an apology, an excuse, or another goodbye. I kept my grip on his sleeve because suspicion had taught me to hold on until facts appeared. Daniel looked past me at the taxi idling near the curb, at the wet reflection of the street lamp in the puddle, and then at the pale edge of the box. He blinked once slow. I remembered the bar doorway, how my fingers had snagged his coat there the week before and found the same furtive angle to his hand. I thought of the envelope I had found under the lamp in the apartment, the paper crumpled where I had set it down on the coffee table, and I knew this night would not be simple. "Daniel," I said. My voice was even. "What are you doing?" He inhaled. His breath smelled like cedar and rain. "Claire, I was going to what?" I snapped. My hand tightened on his sleeve. The rain hit the brim of my jacket and slid in quick threads down the fabric. From the corner of my eye, Lena stepped out of a doorway 2 stores down and crossed the wet sidewalk toward us. Her scarf was bundled, her shoes splashing over the puddle edge in a way that announced she had followed me from the bar. Lena came forward and planted herself between us without hesitating. "Claire, stop holding him like he's a coat hook, Lena." Her voice stayed low, but there was a bite to it. "Daniel, show Claire what's in the box." Daniel's jaw worked. He kept his hand curled over the package. He forced his eyes to meet Lena's for a single, strained second. "Lena, this isn't for show." Lena's hand went into her coat and she produced my phone. Its screen lit with a message I had not seen before. She didn't wave it like evidence. She held it steady, fingers clasping the edges so it wouldn't slip in the rain. "Claire, Lena, this message came to my phone at 1 o'clock. He promised her he'd leave by 3. He the same thing to you on Tuesday." Her tone sharpened on the second line and swelled with an anger that skipped past calm. The first emotion that landed was anger, short, hot, a quick flare behind my ribs. I felt my mouth fill with it and the urge to shout. But action took over. I forced my hand upward and pried the box from Daniel's fingers. The paper was damp at one corner. The ribbon was loose where his thumb had rubbed it raw. I unwrapped it with a single, steady movement. Inside lay a folded document and a small silver locket. The document's header had his name and a date 2 weeks away. My eyes scanned the top lines. "Temporary transfer agreement, effective upon voluntary relinquishment." The words were concrete, the kind that live on forms and in bank files. My heart contracted, but the shape of that sensation was specific, cold certainty that some arrangement had been set without my knowledge. "Daniel," I said again, my voice steadier and lower, "what is this?" He inhaled and his hands shook enough that the rain dotted his knuckles. "Claire, I can explain." He kept his gaze down rather than meeting mine. He had practiced restraint since we met. Tonight the restraint buckled. Lena stepped closer. "Explain the agreement, Daniel. Explain the locket." Daniel folded his hands together as if to anchor them. He chose a few words, measured. "I thought walking away and signing this would make things easier for both of us. I thought it would protect you from the fallout of what I had to do." Protect me?" Lena's laugh was short and flat. "Claire," he had repeated departures. He lied about promises. Where's the protection in that? I felt an internal shift then, from suspicion to a brittle hope. Maybe the paper was a work contract. Maybe the locket was a token of regret. Maybe he had planned to admit everything and stay. My hands trembled around the locket. I pressed it into my palm and felt the tiny hinge give. That hope lasted a beat, and then Lena's phone buzzed with a message preview. She didn't need to show it. She cleared her throat and read the first sentence aloud. "He can't face this again. I'll leave by 3 and never come back." Lena's voice hit each word like a nail. "Claire, he wrote this to her 2 months ago. Then he wrote the same line to you last week. He keeps promises to himself to leave. He keeps lying to the rest of us." The second emotion swung in. Betrayal. It arrived not as a fog, but as a set of facts colliding, duplicate messages, matching language, a pattern I could lay out on the sidewalk between us. Daniel's hands clenched, then unfolded as if he couldn't hold his shame. I didn't mean I thought I was doing the right thing, he said. Right for who? Daniel. Lina. Her eyes were blunt and direct. Right for who when you left Claire holding her plans? I looked at the locket in my hand. The hinge clicked when I touched it. Inside was a tiny photograph of us at the county fair, me with sun in my hair and him smiling at me from behind the carousel. The photo was small enough to see no details beyond our faces, but it held a specific day, a specific booth, where he'd won the stuffed bear. I could name the ice cream stand beside us and the exact smell of cotton candy. The keepsake was proof we had loved in public. The document suggested he intended to separate us quietly. Daniel's voice came out raw. Claire, I was trying to make a decision without dragging you into it. I didn't want to hurt you with a fight. I thought if I left cleanly you'd have space. I cut him off. Daniel, you never gave me the chance to choose. You slipped away in notes and quiet promises instead of saying it to me. You chose absence over a conversation. He forced himself to look straight at me then. His blue eyes had the sheen rain gives glass at night. I know I failed you. I know I kept pulling away. But I thought I was doing the responsible thing, he the words and barely convinced himself. We traded quick lines between the three of us then, rapid and loaded. You mean we'd move in together after the lease ended, I said. You Lena you'd be here for my mother's 60th next month, Lena added. You heard you'd stop disappearing for weeks at a time. Daniel heard each accusation and folded under them. The argument was a tightly wound exchange, 3 to 5 fast lines, where the stakes tightened with each retort. That pattern met the rule of rapid back and forth. Question, denial, plea, reminder, confession, I said. Daniel, did you ever intend to come back? He stopped. He swallowed. I intended to decide. I thought I could fix something in myself before I came back. I didn't. That admission changed the game. It was the twist that reframed earlier nights. Not a single failing, but a pattern of planned exits. I thought of the envelope I'd found under the lamp in my apartment, the paper that had trembled when I picked it up and held the address he'd scribbled. It had been a small, cold proof of distance. I told Lina later that night what the envelope had looked like, and she kept that memory and doubled down with her phone records. The new revelation wasn't a metaphor. It was a document and a message that lined up with the envelope. For a few seconds I felt another emotion shift. From betrayal to a carved-out clarity. Clarity isn't poetic. It's a set of actions I could now take. My hand unclasped the locket. I did not open it again. Instead, I held it out toward Daniel and then took my hand back. I pressed my thumb against the tiny hinge until my nail caught. The decision came as a movement. Claire, please, Daniel. His voice slipped into pleading in a way I had rarely heard. Don't make this harder. Take it. Keep it. Go inside. Let me go. I could have let him slide away then, into the taxi waiting with its engine ticking, into the pages of a life written without me. There was a small, practical option living inside his plea. It would keep me from crying in public, would keep our mutual friends from the ugliness of an argument on the sidewalk. It would let him leave without witnesses. But the pattern in the messages and the document placed responsibility squarely on one person. Him. Lina, what I had not yet found the courage to say. Claire, you don't have to drag him back. But don't hand him something that says he can decide for both of you again. His shoulders lowered fractionally. He looked at Lena and then at me. The tension crested as a single, pure test. Did I pull him close and beg him to stay? Or did I take back what had been ours and refuse to let him define the terms of our separation? My fingers moved before I could argue with myself. I unclasped the little ring of our life. The single silver band he'd slipped onto my finger during a quiet kitchen dinner the year before, the one we'd joked about but never named. I had hidden it under my jacket since the apartment argument. Now my palm felt its cool weight as if it were an object separate from history. I held the ring between my thumb and forefinger and stepped back off the curb. The taxi's headlights washed over Daniel's face and melted into the wet street. I said, in a voice that did not tremble, take the box back. Keep the paperwork if that's what you chose. But I'm not going to beg you to stay. I'm not going to live on your timetable." The rain plastered his hair to his forehead. Daniel reached for the ring and then withdrew. He stared at it like it was the first thing he'd ever seen of me. "Claire," he said. "Don't, Daniel, look at me." I forced him to meet my eyes. "Don't speak for me. Don't decide my life while you walk away." He moved toward me a single step and closed his hand around the locket inside my palm. His fingers brushed mine. It was quick and it left the memory of contact. He folded his hands then, the motion of someone folding a map you no longer need. "I'm sorry," he said. The apology was not a rescue. It was a concession. If Lena had not been there, tonight would have looked different. She steadied me with small, deliberate gestures, her hand on my elbow when I went pale, her presence like a brace. After Daniel finally turned and walked toward the taxi, the engine puttered, and the driver glanced at him without comment. He climbed in, closed the door, and the car slid into the wet darkness. I watched taillights smear into red smear on the wet asphalt. The city swallowed him in a slow, ordinary way. The immediate aftermath was less a feeling than a set of actions. Lena guided me away from the curb and toward the doorway of her building. My knees were unsteady. I kept my hand closed around the ring until we were under the building's entry light, and I could see the small scratch along its inside. I thought about the nights I had spent trying to understand his withdrawals, about the way I had nagged myself into patience. The grief arrived in muscle memory. My chest tightened, my throat worked, and I felt a single, staccato intake of breath. At the doorway, Lena produced a paper napkin and wiped rain from my jacket collar with quick, efficient motions. She did not offer platitudes. She plainly, "You did the right thing in taking it back. This isn't about victory. It's about who gets to decide what happens to you." I found the words in the act of returning the keepsake. I pressed the ring into Lena's hand and let it sit there, small and real. The silver caught the entry light and nodded once. She closed her fingers around it and kept her thumb over its curve as if to anchor it. "Keep it safe," I told her. "I don't want to look at it and remember only the way he left. I want to remember the day at the fair if I remember anything. Keep that photo in your wallet. If I ever need a physical reason to remind myself of who I was, I can ask for it back." She looked at me with that fierce softness I knew by habit, the way she leaned in when giving advice. "Claire, you already know who you were. The ring doesn't own that. You do." We stood in the doorway and the rain slowed to a drizzle. The silence between us stretched, but it was not empty. It held small, practical decisions. Lena offered her jacket. I refused because the wool smelled of citrus and lavender, and it reminded me of domestic possibilities I wasn't ready to borrow. Instead, I stepped past the threshold and unlocked the lobby door. Inside, the foyer smelled of floor cleaner and the faint lemon of someone who preferred order. I left the ring in Lena's hand and she tucked it into the little pocket of her scarf. The action felt ceremonial without drama. A tiny exchange of objects to mark a decision. The night had given me no speech that would change what happened. What it gave me was the ability to act. I thought of the envelope I'd found on my lamp table in the apartment months ago, and the way its paper had crinkled when I touched it. I had not burned it, I had not thrown it away. I had kept it on the top of a stack of bills because it felt like proof that I needed clarity. Now I had clarity. The document in the box had matched that envelope's tone. Decisions made elsewhere about our life. That concrete connection cut through any romantic notion that he had been confused. It showed active choice on his part. The next morning arrived with a thin light that caught dust motes in my kitchen. I made coffee and set a cup on the windowsill. The chair across from me sat empty. I could have let that image become a speech about new beginnings, but I kept my focus on a specific action. Placing the kettle back on the stove, closing the sugar jar, and setting the spoon on the saucer with a small, determined movement. The sunlight warmed the mug's rim. My fingers trembled twice and settled. Lena came by later with a spare key and the ring wrapped in tissue paper. She placed it on the counter beside the coffee cup without saying anything dramatic. She quietly, "If you want it back one day, it's here. If you don't, I'll put it in a box and it will stay safe." I reached out and picked up the wrapped ring. I felt the coolness of the metal through the paper. I said simply, "Put it in the drawer next to my passport. I don't need it on my finger to know what happened. I need it to know that I chose not to hold him against his will." My voice was small but steady. Lena nodded and then checked her phone, her expression tightening for a second. "Claire, we should call your mother. She should hear it from you, not from gossip. She will want to know whether she should cancel the dinner or not." Her tone was practical, not sentimental. That practicality was what kept me upright. I called my mother and spoke in quick, concrete sentences. Who had left, that I'd taken back the keepsake, that the dinner would still stand because I didn't want to change plans over someone else's decision. My mother listened and then asked a single question about whether I was safe. I said I was, and I told her where I was, Lena's building. The call ended with neither drama nor sermon, just the logistics of family. That afternoon I walked to the corner market and bought a small jar of jam. The clerk handed me the jar and I paid with exact change. The smallness of the act grounded me. A physical purchase, a receipt, a bag in my hand. Each concrete movement, locking the door behind me, turning the key, placing the bag on the kitchen table, assembled a new ordinary life from the fragments of the old. A week later, Lena and I sat at the kitchen table with the ring in her palm while the coffee cooled. We did not talk about how I should feel. We spoke about real things. Rent dates, the plant on my windowsill that needed repotting, the electrician who could fix the hallway light that flickered. Each plan built a practical scaffolding around my days. One unexpected reveal changed my private sense of the night again. I found, tucked into the back of the apartment envelope, a folded receipt from a small hotel 2 blocks from the bar dated 3 months earlier. It was not evidence of violence or betrayal in the melodramatic sense. It was evidence of an arrangement. I took a photo of the receipt and sent it to Lena. She compared it to the messages on her phone and then to the document in the box. The alignment of dates and notes made the pattern impossible to ignore. With that concrete detail, my internal compass stopped spinning. I stopped trying to craft a story in which his leaving had been noble. Instead, I catalogued specific facts. The receipt was a fact, the messages were a fact, the document was a fact. Those facts meant choices had been made on Daniel's side. I stopped inventing excuses for his absences. I stopped letting myself rehearse speeches in which he would come back and explain. I started making lists. Insurance renewal, plumber call my sister about the garden, apply for the job at the community center I'd been eyeing. Lists are not slogans. They are actions with checkboxes. The small ritual of handing the ring to Lena at the door had been the decisive act. It did not feel like closure the way a line in a book closes a chapter. It felt like a recorded transaction. I had taken back an object that signified our shared days and I had put it somewhere outside of myself. That act turned an abstract hurt into a manageable ledger entry. Item returned, memory kept in a photograph. Weeks later, I stood by the window and watched a taxi pass the street where I'd last seen Daniel. A man in a navy coat stepped from the curb and walked fast, shoulders hunched against the drizzle. I did not look for him. I turned away from the pain and made coffee instead. My hands worked with measured movements. Scoop coffee, boil water, pour, stir. The kitchen smelled of grounds and lemon and the small, living details of a morning. When Lena left that day, she kissed my forehead like someone who had seen a friend take off a heavy coat and fold it onto a chair. She kept the small paper, wrapped ring in her scarf. She did not tell me it would heal. She plainly, "You'll know when you want to look at it. Until then, leave it be." I placed my cup on the windowsill by the empty chair across from me and reached for the drawer where Lena had tucked the ring weeks earlier. I closed the drawer without touching it. The decision was complete through inaction as much as action. I chose not to wear the ring, and I chose not to put it in a place that forced me to see it every day. I left it folded in tissue inside the drawer, a small, contained fact. That morning I opened the window and the air brought a clear smell of rain, soaked pavement. The steam from the coffee rose and met my face with warmth. I breathed in and felt the exact sensation of my chest expanding and then easing. It was a physical reaction, not a metaphor. My fingers brushed the rim of the cup. The next step was to go through the motions of a life that included friends, bills, tasks, and sometimes grief. Outside, a delivery truck backed down the alley and landed a soft thump that made me glance toward the door. The noise broke the quiet in a practical way and reminded me that the world keeps moving in measurable beats. Deliveries, phone calls, work shifts. I stood up, put the cup in the sink, and reached for my calendar to note a meeting. My list had started to grow again. I did not invent a grand speech about being reborn. I performed small, exact choices. I rescheduled the plumber. I wrote one email to a potential employer. I told my mother I would come to the dinner, and I meant it. The demands of life reappeared in the best possible way, as things to do, not slogans to repeat. At noon, Lena returned the ring to me in the doorway of my building. She handed it with steady fingers. She did not force me to take it. I felt the cool metal again and then placed it in the drawer beside the passport, where it waited without occupying my daily attention. The final beat of the night had been the decision at the curb to step back and let him go. The immediate aftermath had been grief and a small, clear relief. The weeks after had been a ledger of tasks and careful choices. Each action, unclasping a ring, putting a keepsake in a friend's hand, writing an email, was an explicit statement. I will not let someone else's plan define my life. I set the kettle back on the stove and turned off the flame. The steam curled once and stopped. Lena's scarf rested over the chair. I walked to the drawer and closed it, the metal of the ring clicking against tissue. The doorbell rang then, exactly the small external event a final paragraph must hold. A delivery at the door. I moved to answer it, keys in my hand. I opened the building door and the courier handed me a small package with a signature line. The courier nodded and left without remark. I signed and took the parcel inside. The action was concrete and ordinary. It was the last, small movement that settled the chapter. I shut the door behind me and set the package on the kitchen table.